welcome to our video on stigmatizing disability. I'm Abby.
I'm Zach.
And I'm Jess.
And today we're going to be talking a little bit about a study that we read called the Albrecht et al. Study. So Goffman refers to stigma as a negative evaluation of a whole person that somehow taints and devalues this person in question. He proposed two types of stigmas that we will discuss later in detail, and these are disability and deviance, and he also proposed two theoretical approaches that will also be discussed later, which are the attribution of responsibility and the disruption of social interaction. So Friedson said that people with curable disorders are able to obtain education and treatment when they are perceived as not being responsible for their disease, and when they are perceived as being responsible, they're not punished quite so harshly. And those with incurable disorders are perceived as having greater punishments in society. So Haber and Smith said that disability and deviance should not be placed into the same category, and that disability is adaptable and it's accounted for in society, unlike deviance. And finally, Goffman said that ambiguity and social disruption can occur between normal and stigmatized people, and that first interactions between the two groups can be very strained and awkward, and so this can result in either party withdrawing or being rejected from the other group. And so this study proposed three hypotheses. The first is, do adults differentiate between groups of stigmatizing conditions like the theorists above hypothesized? Do adults maintain greater social distance with persons with deviant conditions or with disabling conditions? And finally, is the attribution of responsibility an explanation for social distance from the stigmatized?
So as Abby mentioned earlier, we're going to go more in depth onto what is disability and what is deviance. It might go against your intuition to say that disability is a type of deviance, but in this article we're going to clearly define them as two separate categories. So the first is disability, which is a chronic physical impairment which reduces a person's ability or function as well as their ability to perform social activities. So the key word within this is physical. So it is a physical impairment which provides a disadvantage or an incapacity to perform in some regard with their abilities. Some examples of this would be deafness, blindness, or cerebral palsy. In contrast, deviance is a conduct which violates sufficiently valued norms that, if persistent, are assigned a negative special role. In contrast to disability, as we define that as more physical, deviance would be more social. It goes against social expectations, which therefore you would receive some sort of negative stigma or negative evaluation for your behavior or actions. Some of examples of this would be homosexuality, mental illness, or juvenile delinquency. The two main differences, as we said, are physical and social, but also perceived control. So one might say that disability has less control over the situation, that they're born into the situation, that they just happen upon it, that they have no control over it. Whereas with deviance, you have some control over it. You behave this way and you have a choice to either behave this way or be assigned this condition. The first theory that we're going to look at is the attribution of responsibility theory. So this theory separates disability from deviance and has consequential effects for the two different categories for the affected individuals. So it emphasizes perceived personal responsibility for the condition that you have either acquired or have in some sort of manner, and it suggests that if you have less personal responsibility, so if you did not have a choice or you did not have some sort of responsibility in your condition, that you would have less social distance, so people would be more likely to interact with you. But if you had some sort of perceived choice as to this condition, that you would have greater social distance. And then the second theory is the disruption of social interaction theory. So every interaction in life is kind of, you could say, governed by social rules, social expectations. You have some sort of expected level of comfortability or perceived interaction that you think is going to take place when you approach someone. So the more likely you are able to predict what's going to happen, the more comfortable you feel with how you think the interaction is going to go, the more likely you are to approach someone. So this would result in less social distance, whereas if there was more unpredictability, it would result in greater social distance.
So for this study, the participants were asked to fill out a questionnaire, and this measured their attitudes on 27 different stigmas. And so the social distance was measured with the Bogardus social distance scale. The attribution of responsibility was measured by asking 6 open-ended questions about 6 different types of stigmatizing conditions, and the researchers then grouped all the 27 different stigmas into 4 different factors. And these factors, the first factor was severe, visible, and physically disabling conditions like Parkinson's disease or an amputated limb. The second factor were social disabilities or deviant conditions like mental illnesses or ex-convicts. The third condition were visible but not functionally incapacitating disorders like acne or scars or stuttering. And finally, the fourth condition was medically serious conditions that are less visible and they're less severe, or they're less disabling. They have less visible and have more disabling effects later on in life, like cancer and asthma.
Results from the study indicate that social distance was tied to the 4 categories Abby just mentioned. As you can see on this table, social distance values increased by category in the order 4, 3, 1, and 2, with little overlap between each category. Overall, there was greatest social distance for the deviant rather than disabling conditions. There was also a positive correlation between the visibility of a condition and its relative social isolation value. For example, the conditions in Category 4 were all non-visible and had lower values than the visible conditions in Category 3. Beyond these trends, Albrecht et al. Demonstrated that the social ambiguity theory was the primary explanation for the variation in perception of stigma. In this table, we see that mental illness was more stigmatized than heart disease, even though the lower number indicates that participants felt the individual was relatively more responsible for heart disease. Overall, the social ambiguity theory was a better explanation, as it was the primary explanation for the stigmatization of the physically and socially disabled. In addition, the participants expressed that they would be less likely to associate with a person who had a condition that made them unpredictable. Fee and Nussbaumer reached similar conclusions regarding the socialization or the stigmatization of the formerly obese. They demonstrated that a stigma can persist even after a condition is gone. For 18% of participants expressed that they would be hesitant to engage in a romantic relationship with the formerly obese. Those with family members and friends that were obese were less likely to report high social distance values. On the other hand, those that were more hesitant tended to believe that the formerly obese were less responsible for their body size, and that they would be more likely to gain the weight they had just lost. Consistent with Albrecht et al., Fee and Nussbaumer established that unpredictability rather than the attribution of responsibility influences stigmatization.
Thank you.